Hi, I'm Tom from Just One Pack, and this is AC on the short Alpha Clash podcast, where I talk all things Alpha Clash on my way to work. Now, I had a chat during a game about Clash Grounds this weekend, and that that made me think about the card types of Alpha Clash and how useful they are. So let's dig in. Now, usually I have a point that I sort of want to get across. I don't know if that actually happens anytime, uh, but this time I don't have a conclusion. To be perfectly honest, as I mentioned, I had a game this weekend in the Leaky Teacup, the Clashing Teacups, very friendly open league. It is always an enjoyable experience to play those games. I play them online since I'm not anywhere near the Leaky Teacup, which, if you don't know, is one of the two European champion stores. The other one is in Oslo, Norway. I really want to get a hold of them. Anyway, um, we were playing in this league, and we were playing online. So we had a bit of a chat while we were playing, and sort of hang around a bit. And we were talking about how Clash Grounds would and would not make it into the deck. And I did an observation, well, we both did an observation, that very often Clash Grounds tend to end up as resources. At least for the both of us, Clash Grounds were usually the ones that played one of two roles, unless you specifically build around the Clash Ground. They play one of two roles, either as a resource or a way to remove the other one's Clash Ground. So I was playing a deck that where part of the strategy was to get my Clash Ground out. I was playing Death Door, and I had great success in the first game, not so much in the second with that. However, the thing that hit us was this resourcing of things, and when we are deck building, we sort of tend to not. The Clash Grounds are some of the cards that was not going to go into the deck. They were the ones being cut whenever we were deck building. I thought that was odd. I wondered if I actually did that, and turns out I sort of do, but there is one or two types of cards that goes before that. So I'm not saying these are the just to make a big fat mark under this. I'm not saying that there are bad card types. It's just they have more niche usage than something like Clash cards. Clash cards, the way I went about this was I was curious. So I went and looked at the top tier decks I could find, both on Deck Planet and on the Alpha Clash TCG.com website, where they sort of have these featured decks, right? I went back to articles from previous gambits competitions, and trying to figure out what was the best of the players playing. And it turns out my expectation was that Clash Grounds would be thin on the ground. This was not the case. Well, while they weren't as common in decks as Clash cards, which sort of is the main the main character of our deck, right? They weren't uncommon. They usually had 4 to 8 of them, at least for the decks. This is not a big data set, just to be clear. But as it turns out, most of them had them in their decks and not in their sideboard. So they were sort of signaling that this was a staple part of their decks. And when I went back through my own decks that I've built and some of the decks from my own community, it turns out that Clash Grounds is almost always there. But you know what's not always there? Traps. Some Some contenders rely on traps, some strategies rely on traps, sort of. I'm not counting ambush cards like Krong's ambush card or discarded ambush cards, but traps, the accessory trap, those are really thin on the ground. Usually, they're not even in there, so that sort of that tickles my curiosity if they are just worse than anything else. One thing that's also scarce is action, or even, to some extent, the quick actions. The thing with quick actions, though, is that might be the number and versatility of them rather than the effect of the card themselves. To me, a trap is like a quick action to some extent. Only has a specific counter moment for it, right? But usually quick actions do too. But they're sort of more obvious quick actions, right? So I was kind of surprised to see that traps are really, really rare in high stakes games or high competitively games or decks, and even in my own decks. So if there were a not so well put together card type that or utilized, maybe that's the right word, right? A not so utilized card type, that would be traps. Which is sort of funny because they tend to be in a lot of games. Yu-Gi-Oh has them. I know Flesh and Blood has them. It's also an internal format. So they are there, and even Magic to some extent had this trap set up where you could foretell cards. I think that came with Kaldheim. That you could foretell cards from price. That's sort of trap cards. You put them down, you can play them from there. That being said, there is a design space around traps that has not yet been utilized, have not been explored. So yeah, Rising Empire Studio, if you're listening, go ahead. That's free advice. That could be fun. As a sort of a mechanic to center around. Maybe even get some benefit from setting a trap. The thing though with traps versus Clash Grounds, which you sort of think maybe that plays a role, is that there are ways to remove traps. There are loads of interactions says non-trap accessories or remove an accessory, and then the whole accessory board is easily manipulated. However, Clash Grounds are not, which is why my adversary at this weekend's game, this Saturday, sort of played Clash Grounds to be able to remove my Clash Grounds, which was really interesting. The only real removal for Clash Grounds is Clash Grounds. I haven't been able to find a single Clash Ground removal card that is not itself a Clash Ground. It might be out there, might be looking at the wrong keyword, but I have not been able to find it. So, yeah, Clash Grounds is really an odd one in that context that we sort of wanted there. So we sort of don't play it in great numbers, but we sort of want it there. But maybe, I can't figure that out, maybe they're just there to be Clash Ground removals. An interesting point to that is that when I look through the competitive games, the competitive decks, there is a tendency for Clash cards to be 4 or 3 off, unless they're unrivaled, which then there's only one, right? They tend to be 2 and 1 offs. They tend to be 3 or 4 off of each. Clash Grounds, however, is very different. there are rarely 4 of a kind clash grounds. So they're much more situational, apparently, where you maybe and maybe not want them. Those who played most clash grounds, as far as I remember, played something like 6 or 7, something like that, and had usually several different clash grounds with only 1 or 2 copies, where I only remember a single deck that ran 4 copies of the same clash ground, and one even played 3 and had 1 the sideboard. But they were scarce in that context, which makes me think that they're not a central part of the strategy, rather than a small, seasoning of the deck and an opportunity to remove the opponent's clash card. Anyway, that was an interesting thing to discover, I think, which is why I want to talk about it. Now, I want to end on it in. I'm going to do that again. I want to end with a different observation, because I had an expectation going into this. Almost none of my cards are actions, not just quick action, but actions, because in my mind, at the very least, unless I specifically play something that needs actions, that would be something like Magnate that has this ability with actions. Actions are less valuable in my, or at least they were in my mind. When I went through the competitive decks, they weren't that rare. Almost everyone had them at a rate about or above clash grounds. So my mental image of actions being the quote-unquote worst card, or least used card, it was apparently wrong. Now, I haven't had, as I mentioned, I haven't done a big data set. I've just looked at the, I don't know, 12, 15 decks I could find from the high competitive part. But actions were not uncommon there. There weren't a lot of them, but they weren't uncommon. They were a little bit more common than clash grounds, which was really interesting. So, but again, hardly any traps. Even the old Moxie Sharpshooter, which was such a valuable card in the first set, is scarce on the ground. So, anyway, that was my rant without a point about card types. I'm really looking forward to seeing what, not in the next set. Well, I'm looking forward to the next set and next set again, and how these things might or might not develop. There is loads of ways of using them, and we can only look forward to what is to come. Anyway, that was it for me now. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.